We're excited to have everyone here today. We know that your attention is probably needed in several spaces right now, but as I said in my email correspondence, we're humbled and we're grateful that you're giving us some of your time today to discuss and talk about such an important issue, especially with today's climate. As such, we want to stop and we want to take a 90-second moment of silence for the nearly 9 minutes that George Floyd had a knee on his neck. So we'll pause and we'll do that now. Thank you. Thank you. So I'd like to go ahead and introduce our presenter for today's workshop. I'm gonna read a little bit of her bio here. We have Dr. Julie R. Alexandrin. She's an administrator and an associate professor at the University of Phoenix in the College of General Studies. Dr. Alexandrin started her career as a learning disability teacher in a public middle school in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. After realizing she could affect change in education more through working in higher education, Dr. Alexandrin earned her PhD in educational psychology with a program centered on the intersectionality of special education, gifted and talented education, and diversity education. Since entering higher education, Dr. Alexandrin has focused on courses and professional development in 2 areas: to create understanding and awareness of the 2 oppressed communities of the disabled and the gender and sexual minority, and the understanding of personal and social biases and how biases affect interactions with others. She currently facilitates YALLS, a youth group emphasizing leadership and advocacy with a focus on the sexual and gender minority communities, which is connected to Safe Space, NOVA. So we're really excited to have her here today. She has extensive knowledge to share with everyone. We ask that if you do have a question during the presentation, that you put it in the chat. We will try to read those during the presentation. There will be a short Q&A portion at the end. You can feel free to unmute yourself and come on video and chat with us and ask your questions then. So go ahead and take it away, Julie. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ashley. So I'm really excited to be here today. And I think this presentation, even though it is somewhat focused on the LGBTQIA plus community, it really focuses on how our hidden and social biases within our community of the United States really affects all minority and oppressed communities. And so it's a great place to kind of start and to kind of reevaluate, or even if you have done some work with hidden biases before, it's always a great thing to take a step back and make sure that where you are and kind of take a look at where you are. So we're gonna just jump right in. So here I am with my service dog in our apartment in Arlington, and go ahead and in the chat write thoughts that you have about me. what do you think about me based on my introduction, based on this picture? And let's just start there. So go ahead and feel free. There's no judgment here. I have had very interesting things said at different ones, but this is the way I start this presentation. So go ahead and see what you think. We'll give people about a minute just to reflect, and then we'll hop back on. We'll keep going. So we have one comment so far. Anybody else want to be brave enough to share what they think about me based on it? On my picture or my bio? Yes, my dog is very good at camouflaging.
I'll read them for the folks that are on the phone who might not be able to see. Laid back, animals have adapted to camouflage themselves in any environment. Fabulous, relaxed, taking a break. Nice companion, empathetic and understanding. Stress-free, chilling. Tech savvy, jealousy of the home office, organization challenged like me.
Okay, we're going to stop there just to keep going. And the reason that we do that is because we start to make assumptions and classify people and make judgments about them within the first 7 seconds that we meet someone. So in the first 7 seconds that you meet someone, you make 11 judgments about that person. And there's a reason why we do this. So hidden bias, really going back to the cognitive, so hidden bias, we all have biases. If anybody says, I have no stereotypes, I have no bias, that is not true. We all have biases because it really is the way that our brain works. So cognitive theory, looking at that there's too much information for all of us to put individually into our brain who everybody is. So I can't look at all of your pictures, or I can't meet you individually, or, you know, how I meet you and then put you all individually into my head. There's just no way that my brain can do that. So instead, what our brain does is we make these kind of packets or things, and they're called schemas. So within our brain, we have these schemas that help us classify different people, and we do this classification almost totally unconsciously. And these schemas have been created from when we've started, when we're basically from the moment that we come into the world until this point. Everything that we've experienced affects how our schemas are. So there's social knowledge, how we interact with each other, and then they're also where our hidden and our implicit biases are. They're in these schemas, and we use them, and this is how we navigate the world. So hidden bias is schemas are a storage system, and we organize the people and the environments in them. So not only are we organizing people, but we are also organizing these environments. So these are the people that I see in this environment. This is how I'm going to interact with these people. And these are the people that I see in this environment. So this is how I'm going to interact with those people. It gives us an outline of what to be expected. So if I see this person and I see this person in this environment, I kind of know what's going to happen. And we need that as people. We don't like unexpected things. Maybe a good surprise party might be really good every once in a while, but overall, we really don't like surprises. We like to kind of know what's going to happen. We like to know how things are going to play out. So schemas give us that outline. And so hence, especially in the United States, and as we've seen through things, that like we have a very different schema or outline of how we interact with females as compared to how we interact with males in this country. And that really came to light, right, 2 years ago during the Olympics, when people really started saying, hey, the way you're talking about female athletes is not the same way they're talking about male athletes. And people didn't know that. Why? Because these are all these kinds of hidden biases, all these things that we've learned without even realizing that we've learned it from the environment that we're around it, right? And gender is a huge one for us in the United States, right? What's the first question anybody asks anybody who's pregnant? What's the gender? What's the sex of the child going to be? We're so focused on that. That is one of the first things that we try and identify in anybody, is what their gender is. And we'll talk a little bit later about how then that's difficult for people who don't always fit into our schemas of what we think gender should look like and be. It gives us predictability. It makes us feel comfortable in our surroundings. So when things don't go the way these schemas are, that's what then starts to make us feel uncomfortable. So we like the predictability. We like to know how the schemas are, but it also gives us the kind of outline of how I should interact with men, or how I should interact with women, or how I should interact with people at work, how I interact with people when I'm at a family event. All those kinds of things, all of those are built into our different schemas. And this is all pretty much done completely unconsciously. So, example. So think about two people that you know that you behave differently with each person. So someone, maybe your mother and maybe your child, right? You interact with them very differently. Maybe someone who you see, you kind of know out in public and you see them every once in a while as compared to your significant other. Those people you behave with too very, very differently, right? And now think about when you see those two people, do you have to say, how do I interact with them? Or does it just come naturally and comfortably? And that coming naturally and comfortably is that schema just playing right into it and telling you and kind of helping your brain get ready for, this is how I interact with this person and this is how I interact with that person. And that's what our schemas do with that with that unconsciousness. So questions before we go on to how we learn schemas. Any questions in the chat room, Ashley?
Nope.
Okay. We'll just take a quick second if anybody has questions about those schemas. Nope. Okay. We'll then continue on. So how do we learn our schemas? So I was saying we learn our schemas from watching what happens around us, right? Oh, I'm sorry. Now I just went too far. But we learn our schemas from doing that. And so let's see how ingrained our schemas are and how unconscious they are. So we're going to kind of play with this. So this is close to the implicit bias test. If you've ever done the Harvard implicit bias test, we're going to do one like that right now. So we're going to kind of have two categories here. We have insects, and we agree that a wasp, a flea, a roach, an ant, a gnat, a moth, and a bed bug are all insects. And then we have flowers, orchid, tulip, rose, daffodil, daisy, lilac, and lily, okay? And then we're going to talk about pleasant and unpleasant words. So pleasant words, gentle, joy, enjoy, heaven, cheer, happy, love, friend, and unpleasant words, poison, evil, gloom, damage, vomit, ugly, and hunt. Okay, so now we're going to kind of take those two categories and we're going to play with them. So the pleasant, unpleasant words, and the insects and the flowers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show, after we read this slide, I'm going to show you a list of all of those words interchanged. And so this is what you're going to do. As you read the words to yourself, or you can do it out loud since you're all individually, and as you read them, if the word is an insect word, or if it's an unpleasant word, you're going to hit your left leg. And if it's a flower and a pleasant word, then you're going to hit your right leg. So you're going to read it. We're going to have a list of words. You're going to read it. If it's insect and unpleasant, you're going to tap your left leg. And if it's flower and pleasant, you're going to hit your right leg. Okay? And I'm going to give you like about a minute to let you do that. And then we're going to come back. So here you go. Go ahead and read and do your leg hitting. Okay, so now we're going to do it. We're going to take take two. So now the next, I'm going to show you again all those words, but this time, if it's an insect and a pleasant word, you're going to hit your left leg. And if it's a flower and an unpleasant word, you're going to hit your right leg. So now it's insect with pleasant, left leg, flower and unpleasant, right leg. Okay, and here you go. Okay, so now we're going to open up the chat. What did you guys think about the difference between these two? Did you see a difference? Did one take longer or one take shorter? How did it go for you guys? Let me know in the chat. Or did you see no difference in how quickly you could read the words and tap on your legs? The second one took way longer. Round one was easier than round two. Round one was confusing. Second look took longer. It felt a second was longer. Second was definitely more challenging, way harder on the second one. I almost couldn't do it, took much longer. So this is implicit bias, right? We have a society said that insects go with unpleasant things. And we have said that flowers go with pleasant things. And this is a bias that we have learned from birth, right? No one had to come and say insects are bad and flowers are good. These are things that we've learned from around us. And this is how we have learned to judge and to interact with the different groups that we identify in our country. And yeah, and it's funny too, like Tommy is just saying, I actually thought I liked insects. So this can even be that you think that you like something or that, but if society is driving that negativeness more, we sometimes don't even realize that we have a negative belief connected with someone because society has influenced us so much. That's why a lot of people are like, oh, you know, this, if things seem to be going well, let's just keep status quo, without really realizing that a lot of times we're doing things that are causing hurt or negativity to other people, but it makes us feel comfortable because it's that predictability. It's that thing that we thought was going to happen. All of those things, right? It's our schemas. Schemas make us feel comfortable, even if it's not always a good thing, and that can have that negative effect on that. And if you really want to play with this, I can give you the website, and in fact, it's on the end of the presentation too. Or if you just go to Harvard, oh, there it is. Candace has just put it up first. The implicit Harvard test. You can go there, and they have lots of different ones that you can play with. But I always use this one for this presentation to really show people that to do it in a kind of in a non. Kind of a non-judgmental way, but also really show the power that these schemas and these social biases that we've been having pounding around us and influence can really influence in things that we don't even realize are happening. Okay, so how does this connect to the LGBTQIA community, or really any community? So what are some of the, well, let's stay with LGBTQ since we're there. What are some of the negative social biases that we've seen that affect the LGBTQIA community? So are there any negative social biases that we hear about the LGBTQIA plus community? What do you think? Write them in the chat. Yes. Yeah. What are some of them? Sexualized, very, very sexualized. No fats, no femmes. Ability to parent and have kids, it's not natural, right? And the sexualization one is really always one that I talk about a lot too, because one of the first questions when people come out, especially when youth, even teens come out, one of the first questions that a lot of people challenge them is, well, how do you know? Well, we don't ask all heterosexual teenagers, how do they know? And so a lot of times a lot of our youth are like, oh, well, how do I know? And feel that they need to go and experience sexuality just to make sure that they are identifying that way. So we definitely have that. So yeah, all these negative ones that come up that you guys are bringing up in the thing, it's very true. Thank you guys. So if social biases affects everyone's hidden biases, are we in the LGBTQIA plus community influenced by these social biases? So as someone who identifies as a lesbian, am I affected by these negative social biases that I'm hearing? What do you guys think? Or can I know that those are negative biases over there and they're not directly affecting me? What do you think? Can I keep that separation? from the negative stereotypes if I'm within the oppressed group? Yeah, I don't know. It couldn't affect you. It's hard to separate. Yeah, good things to say. So really, it definitely affects how we within the LGBTQIA see ourselves and see our others. And so I'm going to show you what's called the doll test. So this we don't have to really show you how negative social biases can influence. I'm going to go back to the doll test, which was originally used to prove in Brown versus the Board of Education that separation of education separate is not equal. And so this is a redone of the test about 6 years ago when I started doing this presentation, that a high schooler redid this presentation. And so I'm going to just stop here and flip my screens so that we can go and watch the video of this. Hopefully it will come out fairly well. And so this is what's happening. This was done. This is only about four years old, and still how youth who are Black are seeing themselves in society.
No sound, Julie.
Oh, well, that's interesting. I wonder.
Let me try.
I'm a current senior at Butler High School, completing
Are you hearing
my
sound
senior
now?
exit needed for graduation. In the 1940s, research was done by sociologists Kenneth and Mamie Clark. They asked Black children about a white doll and a black doll. They asked them a series of questions like, which one is the nice doll, which one is more beautiful, which one would they play with? And a surprising finding, 63%, the majority of these students, or these children, they favored the white doll over the black. 70 years later, I'm recreating this experiment to see if anything has changed. Which doll do you think is the nice doll? Why is that one the nice doll?
Because I like
Why is that the nice doll?
because she's not so dark like the brown one.
That's the nice doll? Why is that the nice doll?
Because he's light skinned.
Okay. Which one is the mean doll? Why is that the mean doll?
Because he's brown skinned.
Why is that one the mean doll? Why is this doll the mean doll?
Because it's flat.
Which doll do you think is smart?
This one.
Why is that one smart?
Because it has blue eyes.
That one.
The light one.
Okay. Which doll is beautiful? Why?
Because it's white. I think it's the white one. The white one.
Which doll would you play with?
This one.
Why?
Because they like to have the light skin.
They like to have the what?
The light skin. This one.
Why that one?
Because it's my skin color.
Okay. So
Pretty powerful, yes. Let me switch my screens over again. Pretty powerful that these youth who are pretty young are seeing themselves not as seeing themselves as not having these characteristics because society has influenced them in thinking those things about themselves. And so though we don't have a test like this to show how negative things affect LGBTQIA plus community, we do have from an implicit association test that 38% of lesbian and gay men had implicit preferences towards straight people because of that heteronormative really understanding. So this is negatively, we see it because we've had this test done, this society test done, or study is really the word I was looking for, study done, and we've seen it 70 years. We see no change. And that really shows that really we haven't made that big of a change in how we view Black people within the society and how they're represented in our media and all of that. And so we can kind of extrapolate that really any oppressed group is having the same type of situation, whether it's LGBTQA, whether it's people with disabilities, whether it's Latina, whether it's people who are, who are immigrants who have come into this country, all of those different things, different religious groups, Muslim, Jewish people, all of those oppressed groups, the same thing is kind of happening. And we try, and even when we try and have a strong society around them and a strong group, these media messages and these other messages keep coming in also. I'm just going to stop for a second and see if anybody, see if anybody has anything they want to say about the video or this piece or questions. Pretty powerful, I think. Okay, and so there's none. So we're going to.
Julie, do you want, sorry, there's a few here. I didn't know if you needed me to read them for you.
Oh, I didn't.
Someone says, this makes me want to cry so many years later. It does. It breaks my heart. Very powerful. It's a sad testament to our society today.
Great, thank you. I'm sorry I didn't see those, Ashley, because I didn't move my chat down. Yeah, and I think it's really powerful how negative someone can feel about themselves, even when they're brought up in a place that's reaffirming. And I think that that's the thing that's just so scary. So let's kind of go on. So remember, schemas also tell us how to feel about individuals and how to interact with them. So think about, so how does our schema work when one can place someone in their schema? So if I see someone, I can take them, I see them in my schema, I'm thinking, this person, I know how to interact with them. I'm going to feel comfortable, right? And that kind of thing. Well, what's going to happen? What happens when one has put someone in a schema, but it's the wrong schema? How do you think that interaction might look? Do you think it would be a comfortable interaction? Has this ever kind of happened to any of you where someone assumes something about you that was incorrect? Right? It makes that interaction kind of not always very comfortable. And then of course you have what happens when you put someone in the wrong schema, right? So the one, I just started seeing some answers for the incorrect, there's surprise, there's awkwardness. And now this one, how does it work when you put someone in a wrong schema? Most of the time then it's really hard because you're trying to interact with them, but your interactions and them are kind of clashing because you're trying to interact with them in a certain way. And remember, this is all done subconsciously of how we think we should be interacting with someone, all kind of really done subconsciously. So, oh, you know what? I wanted to say one other thing before we go on. So, so the other thing too is that when we place someone in the wrong schema, or we place someone in a schema that's not correct, not only is there kind of awkwardness, or not only is there kind of surprise and all of that, usually what we do, because it's subconscious, is instead of me going, you didn't fit into that schema, I don't know why that didn't happen. Maybe I need to redo my schema so that I can feel more comfortable when I meet someone who I might put in a schema along with you. Instead, what we do is we take out that frustration, that awkwardness, that kind of uncomfortableness, because now things aren't going the way that we expected them to go, and we usually take it out on somebody else. So we're seeing this a lot with people who are gender neutral, transgender, those, you know, because most of us have a very strong, because of our strong gender in this country, we have a very strong definition of this is what male is and this is what female is, and we know this is how we interact with people, and this is how we, you know, how we interact with male, how we interact with women. So as long as I can place you as male or female, I know how to interact with you, I feel calm. If I put you in the wrong schema, I assume that you're male and you're really identifying as female and acting as a, you know, and being a female in your actions, all of a sudden I'm thrown off. And instead of me going, I'm really, really sorry, I take it out on that person. I make that person feel not good about who they are. And that can also really happen if I can't even put you, I don't even know what schema to put you in because I can't identify this, right? And instead of them going, I really need to look at my gender identities, because gender is a spectrum and it isn't just male and female, there's this whole thing, and I should look at how I'm interacting with different people along this spectrum. Instead, you say, I'm really, really uncomfortable subconsciously, because you're not even totally realizing it, and you get mad at that other person. And so this is also how schemas can really create divides between different groups of people when people don't have a schema or don't know how to put people into a schema. And so it also happens too that we in our society affect gender and sexuality. We say they go together. So if someone's very feminine and female, then she must be heterosexual, and if she's more masculine and female, then she's a homosexual. And that's not true at all. And so again, people hit up against these schemas that they have subconsciously, and they get mad or upset at the other person instead of saying, maybe I need to change my schemas. So part of what we hope that you'll walk away from this, we're going to talk about different ways to kind of start changing your schemas, but really start to think about when you see someone on the TV, when you see someone in the grocery store, when you see someone any place, start saying, what am I thinking about this person? Or, you know, the ways that we really judge people are gender, socioeconomic, education level. Those are our three big ones in this country. And so when you see someone in a grocery store or you see a group of people, you think, why do I think this person's intelligent and this person isn't intelligent? And why do I think this person has money and this person doesn't have money? And why do I think this person is female and this person is not female? And starting to look at those things, that will start to bring that subconscious process of this up to your surface. And it's not easy because you're taking something that your brain is usually used to doing totally automatically, and you're slowing it down and you're bringing it up. But that's the only way to start to really changing your schemas. So some people do have hidden biases that can be different than social bias. And one would be if you have experience with different groups of people closely within, growing up. So if someone grew up in a lesbian household, if someone grew up in with a strong family member that identified within the LGBTQIA plus community, you're going to start to see things a little bit differently than society does because you have this other strong influence on that. Now, we know that isn't 100%, but it does help to kind of calm some of the social biases that are negatives if we're getting lots of positives over here. So we grew up with a lesbian. We have a friend who is bisexual, went to the LGBT community events as a child. We went to Pride, those kinds of things. You saw those different kinds of things. Maybe went to drag shows, all of those kinds of things. Went to restaurants where people who were in drag were there on a regular basis, connecting with someone who is gender nonconforming. These are ways that you might have grown up, or that your social bias may have been, your hidden bias may be different from social bias. But that social bias, even if it's a little difference, is still going to be, because it's such a constant on us of the social bias with all of our media, with all of those different things coming at us all the time. So we need to start becoming more aware, more realizing what we're thinking. Ask yourself why, when you're making a judgment about a person, why you made that judgment about that person. Ask yourself, how are you judging like judging me as a presenter that you just met, and why did you make those judgments about me, right? They're pretty mild. I've had some really interesting ones over the years, and so it's really interesting to think about, why did I think that about them, or did you think something else that you didn't even say, and now are you still thinking that, right? All of those kinds of things. And when you're out in public, starting to make yourself aware of those judgments, or watching people on TV, why are you assuming what you're assuming, and thinking about all of that different things. You know, even just listening to people on the radio and listening to their voice. I listen to NPR a lot, and sometimes I will even say, like, you know, what do I think about this person based on their voice? And sometimes it's very interesting to me, the judgments that I'm making. It's like, wait, why am I doing that just based on this voice? But voice is very important to us in the country, like, right? We a lot of times say that people have Southern accents don't have as much intelligence, or people who can't speak fluent English aren't as intelligent, when really that, you know, how your accent, or you know, whether you speak multiple languages, you're usually more intelligent than someone who only speaks English, which a lot of us in the United States do. So, you know, those different things, why are we making those judgments when really there isn't a lot to do it? But it's that whole thing of the people we've seen on TV, people that we've talked to, all those kinds of things. So be aware of the messages that you're getting from society. Question the people you see in portrayal in movies and on TV. Think about why you asked someone the questions you did when you first met them. So do you always ask people when you meet them the same question, or do you ask some people one question and some people another? And why did you ask them that, right? Thinking about what are those things, because most of the time those questions are pretty automatic. We do it pretty quickly. And the way that people are portrayed in movies is always really interesting, and questions. And like, my daughters will tell you that they are tired of me asking about movies and TV portrayal, but it really does make a difference. And watching now the choices that they make as young women, you know, those choices that they've made because we've done that, and that questioning that we've had throughout their lives. Notice the language that you use when you describe somebody else. Is it judgmental? You know, like, oh, well, that's just someone who has a mental illness. You know, don't worry about them. They'll be fine. You know, is that a judgmental statement? And do you like the way that you describe somebody? Would you like to be described that way? So working a lot within special education, a lot of like the reports and stuff that people would write about at youth were just so laden with judgmental, because society allowed that. And then when I would say, really, you know, this is how you describe this youth, would you like someone to describe you like that? And they'd be like, oh, I've never thought of it that way. Well, we should think of it that way. If we're describing someone, how might we describe them? And making sure that we're taking that judgmental piece out, watching ours. And notice the words that we associate with certain groups. Are there certain words that go with certain groups? Are they negative? Are they positive? Those kinds of things, you know, especially when we look at Black lives, and then we really look at how the word Black is used throughout society in lots of other ways. Most of them are all negative. And so really starting to notice those kinds of different things of how the language that we use, and then other ways that we use that same language in different ways. And then actively look at your change your schemas. Take that opportunity when you interact. So when you're actively looking, take opportunities to interact with people or groups you may not usually interact with. And if there isn't an opportunity to have that interaction, especially now when we're all, you know, sheltering in place and interacting with people a lot less, reading biographies, reading memoirs, reading books that also get you to look at different people's experience. Young adult books, just as much as older adult books, can do that. So you can go to different websites that list books that are LGBTQ, that list books that are Black, you know, Black memoirs and things. Native peoples, people with disabilities. If you can't interact with them, learn about their experience in other ways. Educate yourself about different cultures, ethnicities, groups of people. Again, you can do that reading, you can do that by video, watching documentaries, all those kinds of things. And ask questions. You can ask people questions. So, you know, if someone's doing something and you're not quite sure why, or if you want to know more about a culture or why someone might do something the way that they do, you can ask those questions, but realize that it is not a requirement for them to give you an answer. It's their choice to give you an answer, right? A lot of the pressure that we, not only do we oppress groups in the United States, we also then expect them to educate us about who they are, because we see them as a difference in their culture from our culture. And it's like, oh, educate us. And it's not their responsibility. It's not the responsibility of oppressed groups to educate the people who have power in this country. And so we need to really realize that we can ask those questions, but it doesn't always mean that they have to give us a choice. That's a question. And most importantly, beware of your own behaviors. So we do a lot of subconscious behaviors based on these schemas. So one of the biggest things that a lot of white women do when they walk down the street and they see a black male coming towards them, they will either switch to the other sidewalk, they will cross the street, or they will change their purse from the side that person's coming on to the other side. And most of them don't even realize that they're doing that. So really start to be aware of your own behaviors. How do you interact with? How close do you stand to some people, and how far back do you stand for others? Who do you wave at and smile at, and who do you kind of like look the other way, right? People with disabilities in wheelchairs, totally used to people not looking at them, or people who walk more challenging with disabilities. People look the other way. They don't interact with them as much. Own those behaviors. Realize that you're doing those behaviors. And also be aware of your thoughts of other people, and especially when you first meet them. Why did I think that person was that? Why did I put them in that schema? Why did I interact with them that way? Starting to really kind of do those judgments. And this is a lifelong thing. This is not going to happen overnight. Realize that I've been doing diversity work for basically my whole life, but really since I've been in my early 20s for like the last 30 years. And I still every once in a while go, oh my goodness, I can't believe I thought that, or oh my goodness, I can't believe I just did that, because these are things that are so ingrained in us in some ways that we still need to work our way out of it. But it's working and talking and having these conversations that make a big difference. So what are some of your ideas about changing biases really for within the LGBTQ community, or really any of us with hidden biases in any of them? So I'm going to open up the chat again. And if you have questions, this is also, and yeah, my next the thing, let me just tell you too, so that just in case, before we totally open it up for conversation, next week's training, Ariana Rivera is going to come and talk about addressing intimate partner and sexual violence in the LGBTQIA+ community. So she's going to come in and do next week, and then both her and I will be back the last Thursday of the month to do answer questions and to also do some case studies and stuff. So so I just want you to know that. But questions, comments, things that you think we can do to create better awareness of oppressed and underrepresented groups in this country. So, and this is the time too, if you want to open up your mic and share and ask a question over your phone, that would be fine too. And I think we will be distributing the PowerPoint to people. Is that correct, Ashley?
Yes.
Yeah.
There is some feedback already in the chat here that I've been seeing. More so questions than comments.
Sure.
George, well, this kind of a mixture. George was saying, what about the messages that people choose to put out into the world? If you pull into the parking lot behind a white male, in a Magna hat, who's got an Adam and Eve and not Adam and Steve sticker on their chrome pickup truck, like, are we supposed to approach that person with an open mind? When we meet someone new in a professional context and they pull out a bunch of alpha dominance behaviors they read about on the internet, try to crush our hand in the first handshake, sometimes people give you important information about themselves right off the bat.
Well, realize that they have learned these behaviors usually for protection also, right? So, so some people, we grow up in a society, the things we hear about other groups sometimes create us to interact with them the way we have. But what we've seen and what we realize makes the biggest difference is if we go and confront them or interact with them strongly right at the front, right? What happens is their defenses just go up. But if we start to connect with them over other things that we see or other ways that we can make connections, then what we do is they learn about us and we learn about them, right? So one of the diversity classes that I used to teach, I used to work at an all-female liberal arts school, and we used to teach a diversity class. I taught with this other man, and he had arm sleeves fully on both of his arms, and we would do back-to-back intensive weekends. And the first weekend, I would not say anything about being a lesbian. I love dresses and skirts. I just, most people just can't believe I'm a lesbian because I look so hetero. So people are like, oh, you're such a hetero. And a lot of people thought he didn't quite know where to put him ethnicity. And then within the first 5 minutes of the next class, I would come out that I'm a lesbian with children, and he would come out, he would take off his shirt and have short sleeves on and show his things. And you could just see the heads spinning in the class because people had assumed what we were because we kind of wore masks that first week. But it allowed then people to ask us questions and for them to challenge their thinking. What we realize is that the only way that we can really get people to change their thinking is not to confront them and have arguments about it, but instead to have conversations and share and get to know each other. And when we have these kind of common bonds is when we can change the differences. The other thing too is leaving out or having conversations with people. I mean, we want people to change at a much faster rate than sometimes we can, but when we go and challenge people, their defenses go up and then the conversation completely stops, right? Think about it yourself. If someone comes and challenges your beliefs or challenges how you're feeling, you just throw up your defenses also, and you're not listening. And so not to say that, to realize too that people may have come to the beliefs that they have because they had no other choice too, right? So I used to work in the prison system up in Maine, and we would have youth who had no other choice than to talk about male power and, strength of men, because if they didn't, it was looked down upon in their community and they weren't safe not to express that. And there are other communities like that also. So sometimes then giving them this brief and having this conversation and looking at it, then they can better understand, oh, wait, there is more of a spectrum, that not all guys have to be, powerful and strength, that they can be loving and kind and still be masculine in these ways, but they just don't always have that belief. And indirectly, that's one thing that a lot of us really worry about, is because with all the social media, with streaming, with so many different choices of cable, is that we can get so ingrained into just people who believe what we believe, and we don't hear the other side at all. And that is what really is pretty scary of what's happening right now. And so to open people and just give them an option and have them do slow kind of things is the way to do it. But having conversations, yeah. And to realize too that that a lot of people, the behavior that people have too, most of our behavior when we're first meeting people is also a defensive behavior to protect ourselves. And so that sometimes happens too. So I hope that was kind of what you were looking for. It is hard when someone doesn't totally agree with what you believe. And a lot of times too, we have to kind of create that ground space where I know you have beliefs that you don't totally agree with me, and I have beliefs that don't totally agree with you, but we still need to treat each other with respect. And we need to also define what respect is and what that looks like. That's a word that gets thrown out. Oh, let's treat each other with respect. Well, what does respect sound like? What does respect sound like, feel like, and look like? And really make sure that we're defining that everybody in our space agrees with what respect is and agrees with that piece. So sometimes creating that ground piece where we're all have a respect for each other, we're treating each other with respect, then we can start to have conversations that might help us all grow.
Hey, Julie, we've got a couple more questions. I know we're running out of time. There was a couple more comments that folks shared. Shannon said, just like learning about racial bias Reading and watching perspectives from the LGBTQ community will help to slowly dismantle those implicit biases. SG says, seek to understand. Yes, even the Magnus. I find it really hard to be tolerant of intolerance. And there was a question from Tommy that said, what are the most common biases that the LGBTQIA plus members face?
So I think one of the biggest ones we face is that gender and sexuality are connected, and they really are not. So gender, it doesn't, how we express our gender and our gender expression really doesn't have any influence on our sexuality, and our sexuality has no influence on our gender, that they really are these two separate things. I think the other thing too that people is that they're, you know, especially within the trans community and for gender nonconforming, that they really believe that people should either be male or female, that there isn't this in between piece, there isn't this spectrum, that it's just one or the other, and that can be a really strong stereotype. There's also that males are, you know, that a lot of gay men are very you know, very sexual with multiple partners and all of those kinds of things. And so there are some very hurtful ones out there. Those are the ones I can think of off the top of my head. Sorry. Other things?
Yeah, there was another question from Barty. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly. I apologize if I butchered it. Since the linguistic framework is also transphobic, homophobic, and misogynist, how do we describe someone in a non-biased way? This is how to describe someone in a non-biased way.
So I think about how you want to be described, and then describe another person in similar terms, but describing them. So you know, if we talk about, first of all, one of the things that we love to do or assume that we want to do is if someone's showing their real identity, or, you know, are they really that gender when people are saying this is the gender I am. Like we used to say we had preferred pronouns, but the reality is it's not a preferred pronoun. It's the pronoun of the person. That's how they identify, and to not second guess what people are saying. So if someone identifies as female, then describing that person as female. If someone describes themselves, and I think that's the best way to describe someone, is to ask them how they would describe themselves. You know, Ashley, for this presentation, even though she and I know each other, she didn't just assume what my bio was. She asked me how I wanted to be introduced and what my bio was. And it's the same thing for people who are within any oppressed group, or really any person, to ask them, how would you describe yourself? How would you, you know, what are the terms that you would use? Because sometimes too, what we see is that there's different terms like queer within the LGBTQIA community, right? That's a word that's been reclaimed by people within the queer community that describes them. But there are some people who are older who don't use the word queer to describe them at all, or use it in different ways. So I describe myself as a lesbian, and I would say I'm part of the queer community, but I would never describe myself as queer because that's my preference. And we really see that within any minority group. You know, there's some people that prefer African American, there's some people that prefer Black, there's some people who prefer gender nonconforming, there's some people that prefer trans. And so really, I think the best way is really to ask the person how they would like to be described, but also realize the transphobic, the homophobic, the misogynistic, that those do influence our framework. But I think asking people how they like to be described is the best way. I hope I answered that well. Anything else out there? And two, feel free, my email is here up on this page. If anybody has any questions, feel free to email me too. I'd be happy to answer them that way too.
Nothing else in the chat.
Okay.
We're at 158.
Great. Well, I hope you guys have found this beneficial, at least given you something to start thinking about and thinking about different ways. This definitely was not an all-inclusive presentation, but really just wanted to really start getting people thinking about hidden biases and understanding social biases and how they all kind of go together.
Thanks, Julie. Thank you for joining us, everyone. As Julie mentioned, next week's workshop will be addressing intimate partner and sexual violence in the LGBTQIA plus community. It will be facilitated by Ari Rivera of Doorways, a nonprofit direct service provider for sexual and domestic violence in Arlington County, as well as Julie will be here joining us again. I did put an evaluation in the chat, and we will be emailing the link to the evaluation as well as the PowerPoint to today's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you all.